Yeah. And speaking of the Warrior documentary, I'd like to give you the floor to talk about it a little bit. I'll say this one thing very quickly. You know, I know you didn't listen to last week's episode. You were tending to working friends and everything. I know, you had some personal things going on. But one thing, and even if you weren't, you still wouldn't hear my episode of talking.
I don't listen to our show in general. But
I know.
Okay.
But one thing I said last week about the documentary was this. Sometimes the best magic that you create is the one that you spend the least amount of time with, the one that you don't overthink. And I compare that to, some people when they dream. And then they'll wake up in the middle of the night and they come up with a brainstorm idea, whether it's for their company or it could be a wrestler for a catchphrase or a storyline, anything. Mm-hmm. You wake up, you're like, shit, I got to write that down before I forget it. All right. Sometimes when you overthink things, that's how they fuck up. All right. And I felt that the short notice of what WWE had to put this documentary out because of the Warriors' untimely passing was probably the best thing that could have ever happened because they didn't overthink it. They didn't overanalyze it. They didn't think about maybe taking this out or adding this in. They didn't try to you know what I mean? Like they just got it out there, and sometimes your first reaction, your first proof is the best one. And I honestly felt that to me was one of the reasons why out of all the WWE documentaries that have been out there, I love CM Punk's, I loved Mick Foley's, I enjoy Triple H's, I know some people didn't. I enjoyed AWA's, ECW, the Rise and Fall, WCW stuff. But for some reason, maybe because I was always a huge Warrior fan growing up, but I watched this documentary like 5 times. I know it's shorter, but I just enjoyed it. Watched it. It was just my favorite one to date.
No, me too. I mean, I put it on. I saw, the way it was even the whole production of it, the way it went from start to finish. The timing of it was unbelievable, and obviously Vince McMahon really got to you. His emotional state especially with the little engine that could book. That got to me too, and you warned me about that little engine that could part. The book that he gave to Vince.
Yep. How cool was that?
It was great, and just even what he wrote to Vince, and just 2 days later, him dying. It's so, just unbelievable. Sting
surreal.
said it was almost like a prophecy. It was
surreal.
It was unbelievable.
Surreal.
Sting was even saying, "Is this real? Is this really happening?" Like that's how you felt when you were even watching it. This is movie-esque, beginning and end. Such a great. Story that has such a sad ending, but then you're brought back up with the way people, even Vince said, the Warrior was never one to garner sympathy, so he wants people to celebrate his memory. But the way it started with him in the car and going to the headquarters and him meeting Triple H and then, and what Vince said about him shedding the anger and the angst that he always had and that kind of energy that made people uncomfortable. Warrior was so happy during this whole time. I'd never seen the guy smile so much. I mean, it's unbelievable. It was almost like just a transformation in front of your eyes. And it was real. It wasn't like those typical phony, the cameras on documentaries. This was about the best documentary I've ever seen the WWE do. I like this better than Wrestling with Shadows. I like this better than Beyond the Mat. This was great. And it has nothing to even do with Ultimate Warrior being one of my favorites. It's just the story and the way they did it. And the interviews were so compelling. And like I said, it was so strange to see Sting on a WWE-produced thing, right? It was like, when you see Sting and Hogan, like you said a couple weeks ago, you got to give Hogan a little credit for respect. There was a phonyism about Hogan and a lot of things, but I think generally he felt bad about what happened and stuff. I mean, Hogan was a real thorn in the Warriors' side over the years. He was one of his biggest detractors. And they made a lot of money together in the WWE. And I think, and when Warrior was saying, I got to be able to trust you, and it was a real moment between the two of them. You almost felt bad for Hogan, right? Don Tony, when he was shaking Warrior's hand, and Warrior was like, I got kids, and, you put me down, and it's hard to trust you. And it was like two friends talking, right, Don Tony?
Yeah.
Like there was no cameras on them.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I thought the best part, though, was without a doubt when Stephanie was talking about the Warrior going into the Hall of Fame, and he wanted Linda McMahon, and the moment he had with Linda McMahon in that room, and they were talking. And once again, you could just see anybody who thought Jim Hellwig was ever a dick, it just totally goes away. As Vince McMahon said, it was like a wonderful thing to see Warrior so happy. There's you're cheering from even if you weren't a fan. A friend of mine watched it just on my recommendation, and she said, I'm cheering for this guy the whole time, and when he dies in the end, like a movie, I'm crying. She goes, I don't even know who he is, and I was crying when I heard he died. Yeah. She goes, and I don't even know who he is. I just like the story.
You know what's funny about all of this? If this was a Hollywood movie, it would get shitted on. It would get shitted on until no end. You know why? Because what Hollywood would say is that the whole premise of the story is great, but the fact that he dies right after the Hall of Fame and gets closure and makes all these amends. I'm talking if this was a script.
Unbelievable.
If this was a script, it would not be believable. It would be like, oh, it's just a fantasy.
Yeah, they set it up that way.
Right.
It's, as Vince McMahon said, the timing was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, just you cannot even believe it.
Yep.
That it's, as Sting said, it's not real. Is this real?
And you want to know something? I'll be honest with you. I never had a vendetta over Ted DiBiase. Okay? Ted DiBiase, off and on through the years, I enjoyed, his work. I was never a huge fan of his, but when he was putting down Warrior over the years, I got a little bad taste from it because
me too. Yeah,
he would say, like, the fans were never into Warrior and nobody understood what he was saying. And then you watch the promos now. I mean, seriously, you watch a lot of those promos now. They actually make sense. But
it all makes sense.
But the funny thing is, and when the Hall of Fame happened, if anybody rewinds our episode that you, myself, Missionary, and Joey Numbers did WrestleMania night. And by the way, make sure you check out their show Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Wrestling Soup. The night of WrestleMania, when we did the recap show, on that show, I said one of my favorite parts of the night of the Hall of Fame was when Ultimate Warrior called out Ted DiBiase and said, Ted, stand up for everybody. Stand up for everybody. And this was before he died. That was WrestleMania night. You could listen to our episode. I said that because I just enjoyed Ultimate Warrior's lighthearted way of saying, fuck you. How do you like me now, bitch? That's how I felt about it.
Exactly.
And then the funny thing is that after Warrior died, they did a Legends of WrestleMania, like little round table reminiscing Warrior's career. It's on the WWE Network. And I said last week, I have no problem with the people they selected, but I thought it was just I questioned WWE's choosing of who they used. On the panel, they had Booker T, Sergeant Slaughter, Ted DiBiase, and someone else that's escaping me right now. And I'm saying, really? I mean, you're going to reminisce and you could pick these guys, but I know for a fact the only reason
why didn't they have Sting on the panel? Yeah,
I know, exactly. But why was Ted DiBiase on that panel? Because he wanted to say publicly that, maybe he shouldn't have been as hard as he was over the years. And he also said that he wanted to approach Warrior and apologize to him, but he didn't, he just felt it wasn't the right place and he wanted Warrior just to enjoy his moments, which honestly, I personally don't think DiBiase would have ever apologized to him if he never died. But I just enjoyed watching that segment of that, I
got to see that. I didn't see that.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. But the only reason why I like that segment is the whole time you're watching Ted DiBiase and you're saying to yourself, this is a man of the faith. This is the man that did like shows in churches and gave the gospel and talked about forgiving and evil and all this stuff. But meanwhile, always had enough time to really shit on the Warrior's career. And a man of such face like that must burn in him like battery acid that everybody else made amends with Warrior and he didn't. I know Bobby Heenan didn't in other people's, but I'm saying someone that had the opportunity, didn't do it, and now is burned because of it.
Yeah, I mean, what was Booker T's relationship with Ultimate Warrior?
Yeah, I questioned the panel. I'm like, put other guys there. I mean,
I would have put Hogan on the panel. I would have put Sting on the panel.
They had to
I would have
catch their
put
flight.
a couple other guys who at least worked with him.
He had to go back into
Slaughter
his bubble.
probably said some good things.
Those guys, they had to catch their flight, go back into his bubble. Hogan had to go back into his bubble. Take the sun and go on his boat. It's. I don't know.
I always found Ted DiBiase to be a disingenuous douche. I never was a fan of his. I always thought he was full of shit. But getting back to the Ultimate Warrior thing, and Triple H too. Just whether you don't like him, whatever. He did a great job with making amends and mending fences with Warrior. He was instrumental in this deal, and even he became friends with this guy, and it just it was a really good story. And I'm surprised WWE didn't get it aired on the USA Network or something like that. It's that good, kind of like the way Bret Hart got aired on A&E and stuff like that. This documentary, so people who don't have WWE Network should get an opportunity to see it, or unless they release it on home video. Mm-hmm. It's really great. And nothing even do with how much I love the Warrior. Just the story is really good. If it was on, movie of the week or whatever, you'd probably say, "Wow, it was one of the better things I've ever seen on TV." Because it was just unbelievable. The fact that it's real life makes it that much more strange, crazy of how it happened. And Don Tony, you saw 12 hours before. What was the final thing he said? It's great to be back home. I'm looking forward to the future. Mm-hmm. And the guy dies the next morning. It's just like, and the two kids doting on him, his two daughters, he's kissing his daughter on the head before they get in the car. And that trip to the airport, the next morning, he was dying. Yeah. And it's that's what makes you think. You're like, oh, man, this poor bastard. Like I said, even if you don't like him, you are in tears over what happens to this man. Yeah. It's just that compelling.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it yet, you're really missing.
You got to see it. The Ultimate
You're missing
Legend,
something
the Ultimate Warrior.
special.
See it. It's very, very good.
Yeah. It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.